Hey there, wire weaver. Have you ever wondered how to create the look of channel set gemstones in your wire work? Today we're going to do just that. We'll make these fun modern oval stick earrings using 8/0 seed beads and a simple wire lacing technique that mimics the look of channel set gems. My name is Wendy and I'm the wire weaver behind Door 44. The tools we'll be using today are wire cutters, stepped bell making pliers, chain nose pliers, a steel bench block, and a piece of hardwood of some sort. I'll be using the hardwood wedge from my ring clamp, which you can see here. For your convenience, I've included a complete list of tools and materials in the video description below. Let's get started. So the first part of making these earrings, we're going to make the beaded sticks, and to do that we're going to use 18 gauge wire. I'm using brass wire today. You can use any solid jewelry wire. For this design you can also use a filled wire if you like. I'm going to need 4 inches of wire for each stick, so I'm going to go ahead and trim those lengths right now. And I'm just going to straighten this wire with my fingers for now. I don't need to have it super straight at this point. My goal is just to get my lengths cut. So again, that's 1 4-inch length per stick. And then once I get that wire trimmed, I'm going to go ahead and straighten this just a little bit more. I want this wire really straight and firm, so you can also use half hard wire for this project if you like. I'm starting with dead soft wire and I'm going to go ahead and straighten it a bit, and that's going to turn it into more of a half hard temper. This is my favorite technique for straightening wire. I just take a piece of wire and I use the wedge from my ring clamp. This is just a hardwood wedge and it comes in a tool that looks like this. And I use this tool for lots of things. It's really helpful when I'm weaving multiple core wires. I use it to hold the wires. But this wood wedge also works really well for straightening wire. So this is just kind of a handy little trick that I like to use. I use this when I'm making ear wires in particular because I want ear wires to be as stiff as possible. And in this case, we're just going to make a couple bends on this wire, and we do want it to be really straight and firm. So I'm going to go ahead and harden this wire a bit as I straighten it. And then once I've straightened it, it has a nice stiff, springy feel to it. So this is more like half hard wire at this point, and it's nice and straight. We just want to find the center of our wire. Look for that center point and mark that at 2 inches. And this is the point where we're going to make the bend in our wire that's going to create that long oval stick. This is a super simple design. It's a really nice, clean, modern design. So now I'm just bending this wire at that center mark on my 3mm mandrel, and this is going to create our nice oblong oval stick. And notice that I have quite a bit of difference there, so I'm going to have to trim these ends, and that's okay. I've included a little bit of extra length in these measurements so that you can do that. And this one came out much closer to being centered, so don't worry too much about that. We're going to trim these to length so that they're both sticks are the same length and so that both wires are the same length on each stick. And this one here has a significant difference, so we're going to go ahead and trim this one down. Notice this wire has a chisel tip. This is cut with the inside of my cutters. We want that to be a nice flat flush cut. So I'm going to put my cutters just at the point where I can cut off that chisel tip, and I'm also going to cut off this longer length here so that both of these wire ends are even. And now we have nice square ends on our wire, and they're both exactly the same length. That's what we want. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to this one, only we want to make sure that these U shapes are the same. So I'm just going to cut off, trim those wires, and now we have both of these the same length, and that will be our sticks. So the next thing we want to do at this point, we're going to use the 2mm mandrel on our step bell making pliers, the smallest one, and I'm going to grip the very tips of those wires between the 2 and 3mm mandrels, and we're going to make 2mm simple loops right here. So I just want to roll those around all the way and make sure that you've got nice tight closures there where it butts up right against the shaft of that wire. And this one's open just a little bit, so I'm going to just press that in. See that? Now what this does is this allows us to tell the front of the frame from the back. So this is the back with the loops facing toward the back, and the front is we're just gonna see this nice clean line from the front. Go ahead and repeat that on your second frame. Again, just get in there with that 2mm loop and roll those closed. So we have sort of a P shape here. And there's our frames. These are ready to bead. Okay, now that we've made our frames, we're going to go ahead and weave on the beads. And to do this today, I'm going to be using some 8/0 seed beads. The thing about seed beads that you need to pay attention to is they're not particularly uniform in size. There are frequently crooked cuts on the ends. So one thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and cull your beads and pick out about 12 beads per frame that are going to be nice and uniform in size and have nice square ends. And then I did the same thing here in this pile. Now, in addition to the seed beads, you're going to need about 7 feet of 28 gauge dead soft wire. And again, this can be any type of wire. I'm using brass for these earrings. You can use copper, silver, bronze, any type of jewelry wire that you want to use. I do recommend sticking with a solid jewelry wire for weaving. So you're going to need about 3.5 feet of wire per frame. I'm just going to go ahead and cut that here quickly. And then we're going to start by finding the center of our weaving wire. So about right there is the middle of that wire. And I'm not putting a sharp bend there. I just want to kind of make a note of where that center point is. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick up a bead, and I'm going to just let that fall to the center of my wire. Okay, so there's the center of my wire. There's the bend that I made, my bead. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay this wire behind my first frame. So the way you tell the front from your frame from the back is the front is the clean side, the back is the side that has the loops. So I'm going to put this bead right there in the back of the frame at that center point. So we have 1 pass of wire going through that bead at this point. Now I'm going to pass around that frame, and notice that I'm coming out on the front side of the frame. So here's my original wire there in the back, and now I'm crossing over to the front, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that wire all the way through and just pull that wire snug. And then we're going to do the same thing with this other wire on the other side of our frame. We're just going to pass right through that bead. Sometimes the wire is going to want to go behind the frame. That's okay. Just let it come out wherever it's going to come out. And in my case, mine did come out on the front. And then again, we're just going to pull that all the way through. So now we have 3 passes of wire going through this bead. This is the reason we're using seed beads to start with, because they do have larger holes, and you are going to be able to get 3 passes of wire through a typical 8/0 seed bead. And I just think it's important to start with seed beads on this design until you get the lacing process down, and then you can go ahead and switch to something like a gemstone bead that's going to have a much smaller hole. So the solution to using a gemstone bead is going to be, because of the smaller hole, you're either going to have to use smaller gauge wire, so you're going to look at using a 30 gauge weaving wire, or you're going to have to modify your lacing mount a little bit so that you only have 2 passes going through the bead instead of 3. But just for the purpose of learning this lacing technique, we're going to go ahead and use these beads today because they're a little bit easier to work with. So see how that wire kind of looks like a little bit like a bow. This is what keeps your bead centered within the frame. So you always want to have a wire going around both the front of the bead and the back of the bead, whether it's 1 wire or 3 wires. Right now we have 2 going in the front and 1 going in the back, and that's keeping that bead centered nice and neatly between the frame wires. So you can see about as much of the back of the bead as you can the front of the bead. And this is really critical to getting that channel set sort of look. So keep that in mind. We're going to be really careful about keeping track of where our wire is at any given time, whether it's in the front of the frame or the back of the frame. And we're going to want wires on both sides to keep our beads centered within the frame. All right, so now that we've got our bead on, we're going to go ahead and just start coiling around the frame. And we're going to do 7 coils. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And notice that my wire is coming over the top of the frame and out. And we're going to want that on both sides of the frame. So again, we're going to start on this other side. We're going to do 7 coils. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now what this does is this creates a nice even gap between beads. So we want our beads to rest really close together, but we don't want them so close together that the beads end up being crooked, and we don't want them so far apart that there's a gap between the beads. And this takes some experimentation. So I know, because I've been working with these beads for a while now, I know that 8 wraps between beads is going to give me just the right gap between the beads. So we've completed 7 coils, and on this 8th wrap, we're going to pick up a bead and we're going to thread one wire going one way and the other wire going the other way, and then we're just going to pull those wires through the beads. Now remember, our wires are coming out across the front and out, so our bead is going to go on the back side. So we want to flip this frame over. Notice I have my loops facing forward now, and go ahead and just keep pulling your wires until that bead sort of slides into place, and pull everything nice and snug. And then what we're going to do, remember, we want one wire on the front of the frame and one wire on the back. So right now we have the wires, all the wires are coming out on the back side. So I'm just going to feed this between the legs of the frame and bring it around to the front, and I'll do the same thing with this wire. Pull everything nice and snug, and now if you flip your frame over, you can see that we have, again, we have a wire on the back and we have one on the front. So we're going to complete that coil again, and by doing this, by pulling these wires to the front of the frame, we're centering that bead again between the arms of the frame. So again, we're just going to repeat the process. We're going to do 7 coils around each leg, and we're coming out, over and out around that top of the frame. And again, same thing here. There's 7 coils out and around, and then we can pick up our next bead. And again, I'm just feeding one wire in one direction and the other wire in the other direction, and then I'm just going to pull those. And remember, we're going to always add the bead to the back of the frame. So just keep pulling your wires through until you get your bead positioned properly in the back. Pull everything nice and snug, and then switch your wires to the front of the frame. And at this point, you can go ahead and sort of compact your weave a bit. Make sure everything's nice and neat. And I'm going to slide this down just a little bit. I don't want to get all the way to the bottom of the frame, but I do want my beads to be toward the bottom of the frame. We want enough of a gap there that we can hang our beaded dangle on there, but we do want these beads to be nice and compact so that they line up with one another, and then we want them as close to the bottom as we can get without putting that bead right in that U shape. We want to leave just a little bit of a gap. Okay, and we're just going to keep repeating that process until we've got 11 or 12 beads on the frame is about what it takes to fill up this length. And that of course is going to vary on your beads. If you're using slightly larger beads, you're going to use fewer. If you're using slightly smaller, you're going to use more. So just keep an eye on this as you add your beads and make any adjustments that you need to. Like I say, 11 or 12 is a pretty good estimate for an 8/0 seed bead. If you're using any different type of bead, you may have to adjust that spacing. So let's just go ahead and continue. We're going to do 7 more wraps around each leg of the frame. All right, you can add your next bead. And once again, remember, you're always adding the bead to the back of the frame. This is really important. This is sort of the key to getting nice alignment on your frames, getting your beads aligned neatly between the frame arms. Again, I'm moving those wire tails to the front of the frame because I always want a wire going around both sides of the frame. So one comes in the back, one in the front. See how that sort of looks a little bit like a bow on either end of the bead there? That's what we're after. That is the key to keeping these beads centered neatly within the frame. There's 7 coils. And again, we're coming out in the front of our frame. We'll do 7 coils on this side. And make sure, again, just make sure your wire is nice and compact. We want to keep that nice, pretty, smooth coil on the arms of your frame here. Just take your time. And if you have any gaps or something, like this bead is a little bit wider than these others. See how it's just a tiny bit wider? So that created some tension there, and I had to really sort of press the wire pretty tightly to get that gap to close up so we have a nice clean coil. And again, that goes back to culling your beads and making sure that you have beads that are as close to the same width as possible and that they have nice square blunt ends. They're not cut at an angle, which is something that happens frequently with these beads. They're not all cleanly cut. They're not super high quality beads, but they're pretty. I really like mixing seed beads with wire. I just think you can do so much with seed beads and wire that really gives your jewelry a unique look. Don't be afraid to experiment with different beads. You'll be amazed by the sort of interesting looks you can get just by switching up the beads and really not even making any major changes to the design of the frame or anything like that. You know, just by simply changing the beads, you can completely change the look of your earrings. And that's the beautiful thing about this design. It's a very simple design, but one that allows you to be super creative in how you want to finish your earrings. And again, make sure that you're compacting everything as you go, and make sure you're pulling your wires nice and tight so that the lines of your frame stay straight and your beads stay centered within them. So right now we have 6 beads, and it looks like we're going to have room for probably 6 more. We might get 12 beads on this frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue along doing it this same process. We're just going to coil 7 times, add a bead, coil 7 times, add a bead until we get to the top, and then I will meet you here and we'll go ahead and finish off this frame. Okay, so as you can see now, I've added 11 beads to my frame, and I think that's all I'm going to be able to get in there before I reach those loops. So I've added 7 coils to this one, and you can see that I'm right up against that point where the loop is closed. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more wrap. So we've got 8 wraps there on that one. And then I'm going to coil this one same way. Try to get 8 wraps in there. And just press your coil nice and tight. And there's 8. And then I'm going to press tightly with my thumbnail. I'm pressing the weaving wire up against that frame as tight as I can. And I'm going to wiggle it and break it. And notice that I broke that tail on the back of my frame. And we're going to repeat that on this side as well. A little bit harder to get in there, but you just want to get in with your thumbnail, press that wire up tight against the frame, and we're working on the inside of the frame. We want our wire tail to end on the inside. And just swirl and break. And this is a little bit harder to do when you're coiling wire. It's a little bit harder to get a clean break. This breaking trick works a lot better in a weave sort of situation, because if you're coming between 2 wires, you've got enough leverage there to break the end of your wire neatly. But whenever you're breaking your wire on a coil, you're always going to want to press that weaving wire up as tight as you can against the core wire before you break it. And that's going to give you a cleaner break, and it's going to help the end of your wire conform to the shape of that coil so that it doesn't come out and get unraveled. So there we go. This is the first of our beaded frames. I'm going to go ahead and do the second frame, and then I'll be right back to show you how to attach the beaded dangle and finish the assembly of these earrings. Okay, I ran into just a little bit of a problem on this second frame. Notice that I added 11 beads and I lined these up pretty evenly on the bottom, so we have about the same gap on either frame. But when I went to finish off my wraps, I wanted to finish with 7 wraps because that's what I did on this one. But these loops are just a little bit tighter than the other frame. So I ended up having the ends of my wires come out under the loop. So all I did was I just twisted those loops open. Can you see how that one's twisted a little bit? Just to make room for that wire to get in there. And then I went ahead and broke the tail of my wire. And this one I've already bent back into place, so it's aligned, but notice how the coils lay under that loop. And that's okay, but just keep in mind this is a problem you might run into. One of your frames might be slightly shorter than the other, and you won't be able to get as many wraps, so you can either finish with fewer wraps, or if you're like me and you're a little bit persnickety about, you know, making things symmetrical, go ahead and open your loop up so that you can complete your wraps, all 7 wraps. And then again, remember to break your tail on the inside of the frame. That's just going to keep that wire end from coming loose and unraveling. It's going to keep it a little more protected, because once we hang these on the ear wires, they're going to be very stable and protected, and there's not going to be anything that can really catch on there. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that one open just a little bit, because we're going to have to open these up to put them on the ear wires anyway. And that's the next thing we're going to go ahead and do. So I have these ear wires pre-made, and these are my Modern Big Loop ear wires. I'll go ahead and link to the video right up here in the upper right hand corner. You'll need a pair of these to finish off your earrings. So since I just finished this frame and I already have the loops just a little bit open, I'm gonna go ahead and open that just a little bit more because we're gonna need to get it open enough that I can add that ear wire on there. And notice I opened both of these loops in the same direction. And you want to pay attention to which side of your ear wire you're connecting to. So this is the back of our frame, so we want to connect it to the back of the ear wire. So your hook should be facing up toward you. And then just go ahead and loop those in there. You might have to do one at a time. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get them both on there at the same time. And this one is going to be one of those. So I'm just going to connect one side of the loop first. So I'm just going to twist that loop back into place, get it lined up nice and neatly, and make sure it's tucked up tight against that frame wire. And that's just going to keep those wraps secure, and it's going to give you a nice clean line on your ear wire. And then go ahead and get your ear wire connected into that second loop. And this can be a little bit fiddly. Sometimes your ear wires, you kind of have to tweak the angle of them to get them to hang on there properly. And then we're just going to twist that closed. Again, make sure it's nice and neatly lined up with the line of the frame wire. And there you go. So there's your stick. Now, if you wanted to, if you like this look, you can just leave these as is. You don't need to add anything to the bottom. That's kind of a pretty simple little earring all on its own. It has a nice clean modern line to it, and you have that nice pop of color and sort of the look of channel set gemstones. So I'm going to go ahead and add on my second ear wire, and again I'm just going to twist these open, and I'm going to go in the same direction, and then again make sure you're attaching to the back of the ear wire. Go ahead and loop that on there and get it connected, and then gently, carefully twist your loops back into alignment with the frame. And then of course make any adjustments necessary. I can see how that end is kind of poking out, a little bit twisted there. So again, I'm just gonna line that up neatly, make sure everything is nice and neatly aligned. And there you go. Okay, we finished beading our frames and we added our ear wires. At this point, we're just gonna go ahead and add a beaded dangle. And I like to use a contrasting color just for a little pop. So these are again 8/0 seed beads in a teal color. They're also matte, and they look really nice with these green beads that I use, the peridot colored beads. So I'm just going to use 2 of those. And then I'm using 14mm Crackle quartz rounds. I got these at Michael's. I'll link to them in the description below. I really love these beads. They're just really simple and elegant, and I think they look great with these earrings. They just give them a really clean, modern look. And then you're going to need 2 head pins of some sort. I went ahead and balled the ends of these. This is 22 gauge brass wire. Don't know how to ball ends? I have a video tutorial on that, and I will link to that up here in the right hand corner for you. So be sure to look for that. Otherwise, you can use any head pins that you like. You can just make simple loops on your head pins. There are lots of different ways to just make a simple basic head pin, and of course you can buy head pins as well. So to make our beaded dangles, I'm just going to thread one of my gemstone beads on, and I'm going to add my little accent bead there. And then we're just going to make a simple wrapped loop, and I want to make about 3 wraps on this. So I'm going to grip, and you'll get to know this with your tools. You'll be able to pretty much tell quickly, where about 3 wraps of wire is going to be. We just want to make a little bit of a neck on this so that we have some space to make our wraps. So just go ahead and bend that, and then I'm going to do the same thing on my second bead. Again, we're going to add our accent bead, and we're going to make that just a little bit of a bend. Now I'm going to use the 2mm step on my stepped bill making pliers to make this loop. We just want to go ahead and form our loop. We don't want to close it at this point. We're going to attach it to our earrings first. So I'm going to shape both of these loops, and then we'll attach them, and then we'll complete those wraps to finish off our earrings. So again, I'm just making a 2mm loop, and I'm not closing that loop yet. I'm just leaving it open. And then I'm just going to twist that loop open a little bit, just enough so I can get it over my ear wire. And I always insert, when I'm adding a wrap loop to a piece, I always do it from the front. So we're going from the front to the back. And what that does is that positions my loop so that this nice finished end of the wire is facing forward, and you're not, you know, we're not looking at this cross point right there. We have that nice clean bend there at the front, and it just gives you a little bit neater finish is all. It's not absolutely necessary again, but it's one of those little details to sort of pay attention to, because as we all know, details on jewelry make all the difference. And then once you get that bead on there, you can go ahead and start wrapping your loops. And again, I like to get 3 wraps if I can. I always aim for 3 wraps on the front and the back. So you can see there I've got about 2.5. I'm going to just bend that a little bit more. Trim off that tail. And again, you always put your flush-sided cutters to the finished side of your wire. There we go. Trim that off. And then just gently use your chain nose pliers to tuck in that trimmed end. And there you go. Your earrings are finished. You have that nice little pop of color there at the bottom. I just think these are a really fun, modern earring look. And you can completely change these up by changing the beads. It's such a simple design, but it's going to look dramatically different depending on what kind of beads you use, what colors of beads you use. So again, for the second one, we're going through the front of the beaded frame to add our wrapped loop. Close that up, and then I'm going to carefully make 3 nice, neat, snug wraps. Now, brass wire is harder than copper, so it's a little bit harder to get these wraps on there nice and tight and snug. So you just sort of have to work with the brass a little bit more. And always try to make sure when you finish off your tail on a wrapped loop, you can see this one's pretty tight. I didn't make quite enough space for 3 wraps there to fit comfortably. So I'm sort of having to press them down in there. And you always want to make sure that you want your wire tail to end up toward the back. So you can see I'm looking at the back of the earring right now. This is my ear wire here. And that tail is coming out the front. We don't want that. We don't want to trim it there in the front where it's going to be visible. So I'm going to try to make just another half wrap here if I can, and I may have to. You run the risk of chipping a bead when you do this, because I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on that bead there, accent bead at the top, but I was able to squeeze that in. And now my tail is pointing to the back, so I can go ahead and trim that off. Won't be visible from the front. So trim that. And again, always tuck in your ends with your chain nose pliers. Just give it a gentle squeeze, and there we go. That earring is also finished. So that completes this fun modern stick earring. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I upload new tutorials.